I'm in my late 70s. I thought I had time. Now I see how much I wasted. My name is Henry. I'm 78. I remember sitting across from my father one quiet morning. I was happy then, truly happy, and I wanted to tell him how much I appreciated him, how grateful I was for all the little things he did that I barely noticed at the time. I thought I would say it one day. I never did. By the time I realized I should have, he was gone. Those words, the gratitude, the love, the acknowledgement, vanished with him. I carry them with me now, heavy and unspoken. A reminder that some moments, no matter how small, don't wait forever. I didn't notice my father much as a boy, not because he was cruel or distant, he wasn't, but because life always seemed to demand something else. Work, errands, responsibilities. Conversations with him were easy to postpone. Later, he'd say. Later, I'd say. I remember sitting at the kitchen table watching him sip his morning coffee, the steam curling lazily above the mug. I had homework, chores, plans. He glanced at me and said something I can't even remember now. I nodded and went on with my day. Later, I thought, we'll talk then. Later never came the way I imagined. When he passed, it wasn't sudden or shocking, just quiet, ordinary. And I realized something. Our relationship was never broken, it was just unattended. I didn't grieve in the dramatic way movies show. I grieved in the small way you notice gaps in life, the quiet spaces where words should have been. And I understood too late that those ordinary moments were the ones that mattered most. I had a friend, Martin. We met in our 20s and shared a kind of understanding. Life was work, routines, small pleasures, and the occasional joke about slowing down someday. We laughed at it then, assuming someday would always be there. Martin lived the same way I did, busy, productive, always moving. We'd grab coffee, swap stories about errands, projects, minor successes. Nothing ever deep, at least nothing we admitted out loud. Then one day Martin didn't show up. Not in a dramatic way, he just didn't. I learned later that he'd quietly slipped from the rhythm of life. And I realized something. All those conversations we never had, all the moments postponed, were gone. I could have been him, easily. The difference was that I was still here, and still moving. But the thought stayed with me. The days don't wait, and busyness is no shield against absence. My marriage wasn't unhappy, at least not in the ways people expect. It was steady, dependable, practical. We shared routines, paid the bills, managed the house. Our life looked orderly, respectable, and complete from the outside. But most evenings I would watch her sitting quietly across from me, or in the living room reading or knitting, and I realized how little we actually noticed each other. We were side by side, sharing space, but rarely presence. Conversation was about schedules, errands, groceries, logistics that mattered, but not enough to touch the heart. Love existed, yes, but it was rationed, measured in small gestures that I barely gave and that she barely received. I remember one night in particular. She laughed at something I said, and I smiled back, but my mind was elsewhere, on work, on errands, on the next thing. That laugh, it should have been enough to stop time, to anchor me in the moment. But I let it pass. Those ordinary moments, the ones that truly make a life feel like life, were quietly slipping away. And I didn't notice until they were gone. I didn't notice the cost at first. It was subtle. The habit of not noticing became permanent, long before I realized it. By the time I did, it was too late to reclaim the small attentions that make a life feel lived alongside someone. Looking back, I see that absence doesn't have to shout. It can creep in quietly, unnoticed, until you realize that what was missing was never dramatic. It was simply attention. If I could speak to the man I once was, I wouldn't offer advice, not really. I'd only tell him what I've noticed along the way, things he might not have seen for himself. I'd remind him of the mornings he rushed through coffee, glancing at the newspaper, thinking there was always time to ask his father how he was doing, or to just sit and listen. The evenings he spent buried in work, assuming that later would stretch on forever. The weekends he used to dismiss as free time, when he could have called a friend or stayed at the kitchen table with his wife, noticing her eyes instead of the ticking clock. I'd show him how those assumptions shaped the life he lived, how later was never infinite, how the small moments he ignored mattered far more than he imagined. The moments that seemed trivial then, the idle conversation, a shared laugh, a walk without agenda, are the ones that linger now. I wouldn't tell him to change. I would only let him see. Perhaps he would pause. Perhaps he wouldn't. Either way, it would be his to understand or to ignore. And either way, I would watch quietly, knowing what I could never reclaim. I don't move through days the way I used to. Not with fanfare, not with a sense that anything has suddenly changed. Just differently. I notice things I used to overlook. The way sunlight hits the kitchen floor in the early morning, the sound of the kettle boiling, the faint hum of traffic outside. Small details I never paused to see before. I choose differently in small ways, almost imperceptibly. I linger over breakfast instead of rushing to the next obligation. I answer a phone call I would have ignored. I ask a question and actually wait for the answer. I pause before leaving the house to notice the street, the sky, the ordinary motion of people going about their day. None of it seems important at the time, and yet somehow it is. Life hasn't become easier. I still misplace things, still get tired, still watch hours slip through my fingers. But it feels clearer. Each day holds itself a little straighter. And for the first time, I feel I'm seeing time itself, not just being carried along by it. Some changes came too late to fix the things I lost. I can't reclaim missed conversations, forgotten mornings, absent presences. But even that has weight. Clarity itself changes how I move through the world. It doesn't give me more hours, but it makes the ones I have matter in ways I couldn't see before. And in noticing, in the quiet attention to the ordinary, I found a small kind of presence. Not grand, not heroic, just enough to know that life is not entirely slipping away while I watch. It's still here, in the little things, waiting to be observed, even if I can never go back. I notice it now, more sharply than ever. Decades compress in memory, folding over themselves until the past feels almost simultaneous with the present. A conversation from 30 years ago can appear next to one from last week, and for a moment, it's impossible to tell them apart. Faces, voices, small details of life I once thought permanent exist only in recollection now. People I shared days with, friends, family, colleagues, are gone. Not in a dramatic way, not with a headline or a story. They simply aren't here anymore. Their absence hums beneath every routine, every glance out the window, every familiar street I walk. Memory tries to hold them, but memory isn't enough. I've learned a few things too late, but perhaps they can still matter. Pay attention to the people around you. Really notice them, even in small, ordinary ways. Don't postpone saying what matters, whether it's gratitude, apology, or love. Those words, once unsaid, vanish quietly, and no schedule or routine can bring them back. Spend time fully present, even in moments that seem mundane. Listen without thinking of what comes next. Laugh without distraction. Share space without letting your mind wander to what you should be doing. Life isn't found in to-do lists or achievements. It's in presence, in attention, in noticing the details others might overlook. Value the small gestures. Hold them lightly but intentionally. A question asked and answered, a hand held, a quiet conversation. They don't seem important at the moment, but they are the very things that make a life feel lived. Don't wait for clarity to force you. Seek it now. Reflect on how you move through days, on the weight of your words and your silences, on who you might be overlooking. These are the lessons life doesn't shout. It whispers them in the spaces between. I don't close with answers. I only hope that these words, spoken quietly now, are remembered. And if they inspire even a fraction of noticing, even a moment of presence, then something that might otherwise vanish has survived. I'm glad I was finally able to get this off my chest. Comment below and share what this made you think. Hope we meet again.